This program is supported by Protect Plus Gold, a broad-spectrum disinfectant, kills 99.9% of disease-causing germs and works in 10 minutes.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. You're watching Eagle News International. Good evening, CJ.
Good evening, Alma, and good evening to everyone joining the broadcast. Here are tonight's headlines.
A Taliban spokesman promised that Afghanistan under the Taliban will not pose a threat to any country, including the U.S. and Afghanistan's neighbors.
The death toll from a 7.2 magnitude earthquake that struck Haiti has risen to 1,941, according to the Caribbean nation's Civil Protection Agency, as a storm or tropical storm brought torrential downpours on survivors already coping with catastrophe.
Hundreds of firefighters struggled for a third day to contain France's worst wildfire of the summer near the glitzy Riviera resort of Saint-Tropez, which has left one person dead now and forced thousands of residents and tourists to flee.
And a tsunami alert has been lifted after a 6.8 magnitude quake struck off the coast of the Pacific island nation, Vanuatu.
A Taliban spokesman promised that Afghanistan under the Taliban will not pose a threat to any country, including the U.S. and Afghanistan's neighbors. The White House, meanwhile, said the Taliban had promised that civilians could travel safely to Kabul airport as U.S. military stepped up its airlift of Americans and Afghans fleeing the Islamist group. Take a look. Now, the Taliban have offered a pledge of reconciliation. There was relative calm in Kabul a day after chaos gripped the capital of the national airport. And the Taliban have offered a pledge of reconciliation, vowing no revenge. The announcement against opponents and to respect women's rights in a different rule of Afghanistan from 2 decades ago. The announcements came on Tuesday night shortly after the return to Afghanistan of their co-founder, crowning the group's astonishing comeback after being ousted by a U.S.-led invasion in 2001. With huge concerns globally about the Taliban's brutal human rights record and tens of thousands of Afghans still trying to flee the country, they held their first press conference from Kabul. Back. We'll try and get back with the right video after with this short break.
This portion is brought to you by North Luzon Express Terminal.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, Gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Hindi ka na mauhuli sa latest at what's trending. Kada umaga.
Events happen around us all the time. In our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced. Eagle News, because we live in interesting times.
Magtanim ay di biro at sa pag-aalaga ng mais, walang kakornihan dito dahil ang kita ay panalo. Iisa-isahin natin ang ilang pwedeng lutuin. Ganon din ang iba pang produkto mula sa buhok at balat ng mais. Ako po si Robin Padilla. At ito po ang ulat, kaagapay sa hanap buhay.
Iba't ibang sakuna at kalamidad ang nararanasan ng bansa. Kapag may banta ng panganib, kailangang maging alerto at kung kailangang lumikas ay magtungo sa ligtas na lugar. Bilang paghahanda sa mga ganitong pagkakataon, mahalaga na may gobag na dadalhin ang pamilya. Narito ang dapat na nilalaman ng gobag ng isang pamilyang handa. Mahalagang dokumento sa selyadong lalagyan, flashlight, kandila, posporo at silbato, radyo na may bago at ekstrang baterya, first aid kit kasama ang panlunas sa lagnat, LBM, sugat at iba pa. Ang mga gamot na regular na iniinom ng pamilya. Magagamit para sa mga sanggol, bata, matatanda at may kapansanan, pera at mga barya. Pagkain na madaling ihanda, di na kailangang lutuin at sapat para sa 3 araw. Inuming tubig sa saradong lalagyan at sapat para sa 3 araw. Telepono, power bank at charger. Lubid, lumang dyaryo, matitibay na lalagyan, damit, kapote, bota at mga sanitary supplies, sleeping bag o banig at mga kumot. Suriin ang mga laman ng gobag kada 3 buwan at palitan ang mga laman nito na malapit ng masira. Ilagay ang gobag sa lugar na madali itong makita at makuha sa oras ng sakuna.
Malalayong lugar ang kanilang narating para maghanap buhay. Tulungan ang pamilyang iniwan sa sariling bayan. Yan ang ating mga overseas Filipino worker. Pero dahil sa di pangkaraniwang pangyayaring hatid ay krisis, may ilan sa kanilang nagpasyang umuwi. Pinagyaman ang sariling lupain, nagtayo ng negosyo na kasama sa puhunan ang sipag at tiyaga. Ang mga OFW, maraming sakripisyo, ninanais maging kapaki-pakinabang maging sa kanilang pagbabalik bansa. Sapagkat ang ating mga bagong bayani, Pilipino pa rin sa puso at damdamin.
Wouldn't you rather be hanging around with me? You've been away Hi guys, ako po si Jugs ng The Itchy Worms at abangan nyo po kami bilang guest performer sa Letters and Music ngayong linggo, August 22, 1 to 2 p.m. Syempre dito lang po sa Net 25. See you!
The death toll from a 7.2 magnitude earthquake that struck Haiti has risen to 1,941, according to the Caribbean nation's Civil Protection Agency, as a tropical storm brought torrential downpours on survivors. Already coping with catastrophe. Take a look.
On était à fin passer dans samedi 8h32, il est passé, qu'on y a nous tous nous courir nous venir établir nous là. Si nous fait ça nous venir là, nous tellement nos grandes difficultés en pile nous là en pile. Qu'on y a là nous venons pas gain côté pour nous dormir, car nous craser, non plus d'eau en percé entrer sous nous. Côté intercel, tremblement qui passé là, nous venons là hier nous frapper par un mauvais temps par cyclone. Nous venons frapper, nous pas gain bagaille pour nous couvrir car nous, c'est drap nous te prend un monde qui te prend.
Vivons une vie misérable et une vie tête chargée. Et mais la pluie à la cyclone passée et mes terrains inondés, c'est là mounioye, c'est là abdomi. Et nous avons une instance principale vraiment qui aide les mounios sortir de la situation qui est là. Alors ça qui est important pour nous là aujourd'hui, c'est pour nous prendre là mais tout.
More than 9,900 people were wounded when the quake struck the southwestern part of the Caribbean nation on Saturday, about 100 miles to the west of the capital, Port-au-Prince, according to the updated toll, with more than 60,000 homes destroyed and 76,000 damaged. The UN Children's Agency, UNICEF, said that more than 500,000 children have been affected by the disaster. Aftershocks continued to rock the ground in Les Cayes days after the quake, further terrifying the residents. The U.S. National Hurricane Center warned of flash and urban flooding and possible mudslides as Typhoon Grace, or Tropical Storm Grace, lashed the impoverished country with up to 15 inches of rain. In 2010, in the aftermath of the horrific earthquake that killed 200,000 people, Haiti saw a deadly cholera outbreak caused by sewage from a UN base.
A tsunami alert has been lifted after a 6.8 magnitude quake, which struck Wednesday off the coast of the Pacific island nation, Vanuatu. Take a look. Now, the earthquake was detected at a depth of 94 kilometers and was about 340 kilometers northwest of Port Vila, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. The risk of dangerous tsunami waves has now passed, the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center said, after revising its initial assessment. A resident of Vanuatu's largest island of Espiritu Santo, which lies near the epicenter, said he felt a strong quake. An AFP correspondent in the capital of Port Vila said people there could not feel any shaking.
Meanwhile, more than 600 firefighters on Tuesday managed to bring a blaze under control a day after it broke out in southern Portugal, forcing dozens of people to flee their homes. The Civil Protection Authority said the still active blaze in the tourist region of Algarve had been brought under control, although it has already torn through at least 9,000 hectares of forest, orchards, and brushland. Portugal is the latest European nation to have faced heat waves and fierce fires this summer, which climate scientists warn will become increasingly common due to man-made global warming. The fire started in the municipality of Castro Marim in the hinterland near the Spanish border. Regional Civil Protection Force Commander Richard Marks told journalists strong winds pushed it swiftly towards the town of Tavira and Villarreal de Santo Antonio, forcing the evacuation of 81 people from local villages, according to the emergency services.
The Israeli Fire Service said wildfires that have ravaged the woodland in the hills west of Jerusalem since noon on Sunday have finally been brought under control. Hundreds of families had been evacuated from 10 villages west of the city over the 3 days. The firefighters said there were no casualties, but the blazes burned 2,500 hectares of forest. Now on Monday, the situation was such that the government asked for international help to put out the fires. The outbreak began on Sunday and sent halls of acrid smoke billowing over the holy city. Forest fires in this searing summer heat are common in Israel as they are in other countries bordering the Mediterranean. This year, deadly wildfires have broken out in Algeria, Cyprus, Greece, and Turkey. Algeria was hardest hit with at least 90 people killed. Morocco and Tunisia have also been affected.
Hundreds of firefighters struggled for a third day Wednesday to contain France's worst wildfire of the summer near the glitzy Riviera resort of Saint-Tropez, which has left one person dead and forced thousands of residents and tourists to flee. The blaze has scorched some 5,000 hectares in a region known for its forests, vineyards, and fauna since it broke out in the Plaine des Morts Nature Reserve on Monday evening. The local authorities in a statement said one person had died, the first confirmed fatality from this wildfire. The statement did not give the person's identity or say how they had died. 22 people have been lightly injured, including 19 who inhaled toxic fumes. The authorities said 5 members of the fire brigade have also been lightly injured. Some 1,200 firefighters were deployed, some using high-pressure hoses and water-bombing planes and helicopters to control the flames. High temperatures and strong winds forced local authorities to evacuate around 7,000 people from homes and campsites. The Var prefecture said many to the safety of municipal buildings and schools.
Meanwhile, flames surge into the air as firefighters try to contain the Dixie Fire near Milford, California. The wildfire in Northern California has grown to become the largest single wildfire in California state history. The Dixie Fire has scorched more than 940 square miles in the northern Sierra Nevada and southern Cascades since it ignited on July 13 and eventually merged with a smaller blaze. It's less than a third contained. Meanwhile, an Associated Press report says the Caldor fire in the northern Sierra Nevada had burned an estimated 50 homes in and around Grizzly Flat. Governor Gavin Newsom proclaimed a state of emergency for El Dorado County because of that blaze, which tripled in size between Monday and Tuesday afternoon to nearly 50 square miles or 129 square kilometers.
Meanwhile, a Russian light military transport aircraft crashed during a test flight on Tuesday, killing all 3 crew members on board, according to the aircraft's developers. Images broadcast by Russian state TV and shared on social media show the IL-112 prototype aircraft catching fire before plummeting to the ground and then exploding. The press service of the United Aircraft Corporation, or OAK, said the incident took place during the final approach for landing near the Kubinka airfield outside Moscow. According to preliminary information, the plane's right engine caught fire before the crash. Russian investigators said in a statement that a criminal investigation has been launched over a violation of safety measures. It added that an examination of the crash site was underway. The Kubinka Air Base, located some 63 kilometers west of Moscow, is due to host a large military exhibition this weekend. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Protect yourself and loved ones. Use Protect Plus Gold, a broad-spectrum disinfectant that kills 500 strains of bacteria, fungi, and viruses such as coronavirus and other disease-causing microorganisms. Also potent against viruses in pets. It kills 99.9% of disease-causing germs and works in 10 minutes. Dissolve 1 teaspoon in 1 liter of water. Apply on areas for disinfection or use it for misting. Protect Plus Gold.
I'm Kanisha. At may tutuparin akong isang send your letter request ngayong Sabado, August 21 sa Letters and Music, 1 to 2 p.m. Dito lang sa Net 25. See ya!
Magtanim ay di biro. At sa pag-aalaga ng mais, walang kakornihan dito. Dahil ang kita ay panalo. Iisa-isahin natin ang ilang pwedeng lutuin. Ganon din ang iba pang produkto mula sa buhok at balat ng mais. Ako po si Robin Padilla. At ito po ang ulat, kaagapay sa hanap buhay.
Kaagapay sa hanap buhay.
Welcome back to the news. In his pre-recorded talk to the people on Monday night, President Duterte ordered Health Secretary Francisco Duque III to prioritize the compensation and other benefits of healthcare workers. Take a look.
Frontliners, unahin mo na lang. If there is enough money, bayaran mo.
Duterte earlier signed Administrative Order 42, which grants COVID-19 SRA of up to $5,000 per month to private and public health workers with direct contact with COVID-19 patients. Duterte signed the AO to recognize the heroic and invaluable contribution of our health workers throughout the country who bravely and unselfishly risk their lives and health by being at the forefront of national efforts to respond to the pandemic. The government's Bayanihan 2 budget has allocated at least 15 billion pesos for the health workers, SRA, and hazard pay. Last year, Duterte also signed AO number 36, granting health workers directly attending to COVID-19 patients with risk allowance covering September 15 to December 19, 2020. Now, the nation's overall tally of coronavirus disease 2019 or COVID-19 survivors has reached 1,640,721 as 11,628 new recoveries were recorded as of Wednesday. Now, the Department of Health said the figure is equivalent to a 92.4% recovery rate from a total of 1,776,495 infections since the start of the pandemic last year. The DOH also tallied 11,085 new confirmed cases, bringing the total number of active cases in the country to 105,151, or 5.9% of all cases. Of the active cases, 96% are mild, 1.0% are asymptomatic, 1.3% are severe, and 0.91% are moderate, and 0.7% are in critical condition. Also logged were 161 new fatalities, raising the death toll to 30,623, or 1.72% of the total cases. In other news, New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, speaking to media in Wellington, says the COVID-19 case which plunged New Zealand into lockdown was a Delta variant case linked to Australia. Take a look.
Our case has originated in Australia. And now the job we have is to work through how and when it got here. The natural place to start is to look at our managed isolation facilities. We have had 3 positive cases from Sydney in our managed isolation facilities since 1 July.
The Prime Minister said the developments justified her decision to issue nationwide stay-at-home orders on Tuesday after a single case was identified as 6 more cases were detected. The island nation has avoided the worst of the pandemic with strict border control and a strategy of elimination. The nation of 5 million has recorded only 26 deaths from the disease. Ardern also said she was confident the strategy would succeed against the highly transmissible Delta strain. In other news, New South Wales has reported a record number of COVID-19 vaccinations on the same day. It reached a dramatically new peak in daily local cases. Some 633 people tested positive for the virus in the 24 hours. That was 115 more than the previous daily record. 3 people died from the virus in the time period. Premier Gladys Berejiklian warned the state had not yet seen the worst of the outbreak. Let's listen in.
It's really, really important to stress the following point. At the moment, according to the data we have, every person who has the virus is spreading it to at least more than one person. Now, for us to know that we've reached our peak, that can't continue. So what the data is telling us in the last few days is that we haven't seen the worst of it. And the way that we stop this is by everybody staying at home.
A Delta variant outbreak that began in Sydney 2 months ago has spread to western New South Wales state in recent days, with health officials saying most of the 116 cases detected in the area so far were among Aboriginal people. New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian said the outbreak was of enormous concern, with the outback region under lockdown orders in an attempt to curb transmission. It is the first significant outbreak among the remote Aboriginal communities since the pandemic began and has sparked fears for a population widely believed to be more vulnerable to COVID-19. Meanwhile, clutching vaccination cards and personalized QR codes, New Yorkers show proof of inoculation against COVID-19 to enter restaurants, gyms, and movie theaters as America's first citywide vaccine mandate gets underway. Take a look.
All right, everybody. We know that vaccination has been the key. We know that vaccination has allowed us to move forward as a city. So many jobs are back, people's livelihoods, so much of the energy, the excitement, the arts, the culture, all because of vaccination. So now, today, Key to NYC begins. You want to experience all the greatness in New York City? You can. All you have to do is be vaccinated. Even again, just that first dose gets you in the game. Indoor dining, indoor fitness, indoor entertainment. This is a way we all keep moving forward together. This is a way we stay healthy. This is a way we bring back our city fully.
Personally, I don't really like it. I think it's kind of discriminatory. I don't think you should be asking people and not letting them go inside a business that they want to pay for. They want to be patrons just because you're not vaccinated. You know, there's other ways to protect yourself, like we can use masks and all that stuff, but to say that you can't go inside when you can still get COVID if you're vaccinated and transmit it to others if you're vaccinated.
I think the vaccination is good for everybody. It's very good for everybody.
Well, it makes it more easier to go to work. Now I can, with my phone, I just show people when I come in, I'm vaccinated. It makes it easier.
The policy announced by Democratic Mayor Bill de Blasio earlier this month comes as the United States steps up vaccine requirements to help fight the hyper-contagious Delta variant. New York is the first city in the United States to demand evidence of at least one vaccine shot to access indoor dining, bars and nightclubs, entertainment venues, and museums. Establishments have until September 13 to comply, after which they face $1,000 fines. Children under 12 are exempt because they are not currently eligible for vaccines.
Okay, first to the United Kingdom, the health regulator has approved Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine for use in children aged 12 to 17 years. Arian Celestino joins us live for that report. Hello, Arian.
Hi, Alma. And yes, Britain's medicines watchdog on Tuesday said it had approved the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine for children aged 12 to 17 after previously giving the green light to Pfizer. The Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency said in a statement that the jab was safe and effective in this age group. But it added it would now be up to government advisory body, the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunization, JCVI, to recommend whether to start giving the jab. Britain began its mass vaccination program in December last year and has to date seen nearly 90% of all adults received a first dose. More than 3/4 or 77% have had 2 doses, a factor in the government lifting all remaining legal coronavirus restrictions in England on Monday. Health officials say vaccination has contributed to a fall in hospital admissions with more serious cases of COVID, even though infection rates have risen. Earlier this month, the government said it would offer jobs to all 16 and 17-year-olds, but unlike other countries, held off rolling out the program to younger children. They, as with older teens that are eligible, are being given the Pfizer or BioNTech shot. Alma.
All right, thank you very much, Arian, for that update. Do you have any more information for me?
Well, Alma, the government has set a target of giving a first dose to 16 and 17-year-olds by August 23rd to give them some protection before the start of school in England and Wales in September. On the other hand, for younger people, the JCVI said only 12 to 15-year-olds deemed vulnerable should receive a vaccine. A more cautious approach than in the United States and the European Union. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much for all that information, Arian. You stay safe and let me know for more updates over there in the United Kingdom. Thank you.
Thank you for having me today, reporting from the United Kingdom. I am Arian Celestino. We live in interesting times.
And back to the U.S., Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who strongly opposed mask mandate, tested positive for COVID. A statement from his spokesman, Mark Miner, said that Greg Abbott, who is fully vaccinated, has been testing daily. And today was the first positive test result. He said the governor will isolate in the governor's mansion and continue to test daily, adding that Abbott is receiving an antibody cocktail treatment. Abbott has been one of the most outspoken U.S. governors against anti-COVID mask mandates. Texas has banned local governments in the southern U.S. state and any entities that receive public funds from imposing vaccination requirements. He has received pushback with several Texas school districts imposing their own mask mandates against state law. Meanwhile, Uruguay started giving booster shots using the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine to people who have generally received their first 2 doses with China's CoronaVac, a combination few countries have yet tried as it seeks to ward off the Delta variant. Take a look.
Los 15 minutos luego de administrarme la vacuna, Pfizer, la tercera dosis, ya tuve las 2 de Sinovac, entonces ahora toco la de Pfizer. ¿Bien?
No.
Todo.
Un ciclo 14 que hay en
About one-third of Uruguay's 3.5 million residents have already signed up to be vaccinated with the U.S. vaccine after receiving 2 vaccine injections from the Chinese lab Sinovac, according to the Rio Times. In other news, 4 student leaders from Hong Kong's top university were arrested on Wednesday for advocating terrorism, according to police. A controversial student union statement following a lone wolf attack on a police officer last month sparked the arrest, according to Senior Superintendent Steve Lee from the city's National Security Police Unit. On July 1, a man stabbed and wounded a police officer in a busy shopping district before taking his own life in what authorities called an act of domestic terrorism. Shortly afterwards, the University of Hong Kong Student Union released a statement expressing deep sadness over the attacker's death and appreciation for his sacrifice. The statement proved hugely controversial, even as the union retracted the statement and apologized for its wrongdoing. Lee told reporters on Wednesday that it beautified, rationalized, glorified terrorism and an indiscriminate attack and encouraged suicidal acts. 3 of those arrested will be taken to court on Thursday after prosecutors placed charges against them, according to legal sources. Back to the conflict in Afghanistan, a Taliban spokesman promised that Afghanistan under the Taliban will not pose a threat to any country, including the U.S. and its neighbors. Now, the White House, meanwhile, said the Taliban had promised that civilians could travel safely to the Kabul airport as the U.S. military stepped up its airlift for Americans and Afghans fleeing the Islamist group. Take a look. Now, there was a relative calm in Kabul a day after chaos gripped the capital at the national airport. The Taliban have offered a pledge of reconciliation, vowing no revenge against opponents and to respect women's rights in a different rule of Afghanistan from 2 decades ago. The announcements came on Tuesday night, shortly after the return to Afghanistan of their co-founder, crowning the group's astonishing comeback after being ousted by a U.S.-led invasion in 2001. With huge concerns globally about the Taliban's brutal human rights record and tens of thousands of Afghans still trying to flee the country, they held their first press conference from Kabul. Take a look.
مغواړو داسې حکومت او نظام آینده کې جوړ شي چې ټول جهتونه پکې ځان ویني ټول جهتونه پکې شامل وي او له بېلابېلو جهتونو سره تفاهم موږ ته ورسېږو د جنګ دوام نه غواړو د افغانستان سوله او ثبات ته لیواله یو همدې خاطر مبارزه سوې ده غواړو نړیوالو ته د امریکا د متحده ایالاتو په شمول ډاډ او اطمینان ورکړو چې د افغانستان له خاورې نه به هیڅ چاته زیان او ضرر متوجه نه وي همداسې د سیمې هیوادونو ته همدارنګه خپل همسایه هیوادونو ټولو ته ډاډ ورکوو چې موږ اجازه نه ورکوو چې د افغانستان خاوره د ګاونډیو او یا د نورو ملکونو په ضد استعمال سي او یا د هغو په خلاف استعمال سي په دې اړه غواړو چې ټول نړیوال مطمئن اوسیږي ډاډه واوسیږي اسلامي امارت خپلو ژمنو ته متعهد
But when the Taliban last ruled and in areas under their control over the last 2 decades, women have had their rights severely restricted and they could not take most jobs or go to school. Now, in a dramatic twist, also, Afghanistan's defiant vice president made one thing clear as the Taliban seized control of the capital following the collapse. He will not surrender, and it appears Amrullah Saleh has retreated to the country's last remaining holdout, the Panjshir Valley, northeast of Kabul. He and famed anti-Taliban fighter Ahmed Shah Massoud are apparently trying to organize an armed resistance. The relationship paved way for him as NDS chief before. He is believed to have amassed a vast network of informants and spies inside the insurgency and across the border in Pakistan, where Pashto-speaking agents kept track on.
This wasn't a choice just because not saving those women and girls. The alternative choice had its own set of human costs and consequences, as I said. And those human costs and consequences would have involved a substantial ramp-up of American participation in a civil war with more loss of life, more bloodshed. We gave 20 years of American blood, treasure, sweat, and tears in Afghanistan. We gave them every capacity in terms of training and equipment to stand up and fight for themselves. And at some point, it was the time for the United States to say that the Afghan people had to stand up for themselves. The Taliban have informed us that they are prepared to provide the safe passage of civilians to the airport, and we intend to hold them to that commitment.
Now, that was the White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan defending President Biden's withdrawal decision. Now, despite some reports that people are being harassed and even beaten as they try to leave the White House, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said large numbers had been able to reach the airport. In Brussels, meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said the alliance had been surprised by the speed of the Taliban victory in Afghanistan, but still blamed Afghan leaders for the tragedy.
What we have seen in the last few weeks was a military and political collapse at the speed which had not been anticipated. Parts of the Afghan security forces fought bravely, but they were unable to secure the country, because ultimately the Afghan political leadership failed to stand up to the Taliban and to achieve the peaceful solution that Afghans desperately wanted. This failure of Afghan leadership led to the tragedy we are witnessing today.
Girls wearing white hijabs and black tunics crammed into classrooms in the western Afghan city of Herat just days after the Taliban's takeover. As the school opened its doors, the students scurried down corridors and chatted in courtyards, seemingly oblivious to the turmoil that has engulfed the country in the past 2 weeks. Take a look.
ما خوشحال هستیم که مکاتب آغاز شده و می‌خوایم با حجاب اسلامی به مکتب بیاییم و می‌خوایم درس بخوانیم مثل کشورهای دیگه پیشرفت کنیم و از طالبایی خواسته داریم که از امنیت برقرار کنند و دیگه جنگ نمی‌خوایم، می‌خوایم صلح به کشور ما بیاد.
Taliban spokespeople have issued a number of statements in recent days, including pledging an amnesty for those who worked for the previous government. They've also pledged to be inclusive. They have said women can work and girls can go to school. Such promises will need to be honoured. And for the time being, again, understandably, given the past history, these declarations have been greeted with some scepticism.
Women and girls walked more freely in the streets, attending schools and colleges in huge numbers in a city famed for its poetry and arts. The Taliban have been vague so far on how they plan to rule Afghanistan. A Taliban official was interviewed by a female anchor. But concerns remain over the risk of rights violations against civilians, in particular women and girls. What lies ahead for women with the Taliban back in power still remains unclear.
Now, speaking about Afghanistan, during an interview on LBC Radio, British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace choked up and said he has regret that some people won't be able to get back. That and more from our UK correspondent, Patricia Rodriguez.
The Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan is a failure of the international community, Britain's Defense Secretary Ben Wallace said on Monday, assessing that the West's intervention was a job only half done. The former British Army officer last week said U.S. President Joe Biden's predecessor, Donald Trump, had secured a rotten deal with the Islamist militants that allowed their return. Britain last month withdrew the majority of its 750 remaining troops in Afghanistan, but last week announced that 600 soldiers would return to help with repatriation. Wallace told Sky News 370 that embassy staff and British citizens were flown out on Saturday and Sunday, with 782 Afghans scheduled to leave in the next 24 to 36 hours. Officials are aiming to evacuate 1,200 to 1,500 people from Afghanistan a day. The first flight arrived back at a British Air Force base on Sunday night, his department said. Let's listen in on the interview of British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace regarding the Afghanistan conflict.
Our timescales plan on August the 31st for the evacuation of all the people that we would have said was in the hopper, those people that are passing or have passed security checks, those people that are effectively have a ticket to ride, and indeed get out the three cohorts that I think I told you about last week, which were entitled personnel, British passport holders, British officials, and indeed then obviously all those Afghans. I think to be clear to your listeners, we are only now in Afghanistan and have been for the last 2 weeks to process those people. We're not in it for, we're not doing other diplomatic functions. We are simply there to process all those British passport holders and all those people we have an obligation to. And, our men and women of our armed forces are risking their lives in doing that, but that is the right thing to do. They've risked their lives the last 20 years. At the very least, our obligation has to be as many of these people through the pipeline as possible. But I think I also said, and it's a really deep part of regret for me, that some people won't get back. Some people won't get back, and we will have to do our best in third countries to process those people.
Why do you feel it so personally, Mr. Wallace?
Because I'm a soldier. Because it's sad, and the West has done what it's done. And we have to do our very best, Nick, to get people out and stand by our obligations. And 20 years of sacrifice is what it is.
We have so far secured. Prime Minister Boris Johnson had said Britain would help 3,000 nationals to leave, but questions are being asked why he did not do more to oppose Washington's withdrawal. The Times newspaper called the rapid pullout unforced and unnecessary and said it was becoming the greatest disaster in American foreign policy for almost 50 years. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, I'm Patricia Rodriguez. We live in interesting times.
Now, the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan is a failure of the international community, according to Britain's Defense Secretary Ben Wallace, as was reported there by Patricia, assessing the West's intervention was a job only half done. Now, the former British Army officer last week said U.S. President Joe Biden's predecessor, Donald Trump, had secured a rotten deal with the Islamist militants that allowed their return. Now, Eagle News will be back with more stories in moment.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business.
Your weekly dose of entrepreneurial inspiration.
To update you on the latest developments in the world of business. Get up close and personal with CEOs and thought leaders. To help you discover valuable insights, sharpen your instincts for smart decision-making with the latest markets and economic trends, disruptive ideas, global innovation,
social entrepreneurship,
and other leading-edge business ideas. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business, from vision to action.
Welcome back to the news. Britain has helped more than 2,000 Afghans to flee the country in recent days. That according to Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Wednesday, as he warned the Taliban must be judged on actions and not words. Take a look.
We will judge this regime based on the choices it makes and by its actions rather than by its words. On its attitude to terrorism, to crime and narcotics, as well as humanitarian access and the rights of girls to receive an education. For 3 days I've spoken with the NATO and UN Secretaries General, with President Biden, with Chancellor Merkel, with President Macron and Prime Minister Khan. We are clear and we have agreed that it would be a mistake for any country to recognise any new regime in Kabul prematurely or bilaterally. Instead, those countries that care about Afghanistan's future should work towards common conditions about the conduct of the new regime before deciding, together, whether to recognise it and on what terms.
Addressing MPs called back to Parliament from their summer holidays for an emergency debate, Johnson also defended his government's handling of the crisis, insisting Britain could not have stayed in Afghanistan without U.S. support. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Kiro. The news continues tomorrow.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.
This program is supported by Protect Plus Gold, a broad-spectrum disinfectant, kills 99.9% of disease-causing germs and works in 10 minutes.